Right now, though, I am joined by three, not one, not two, but three phenomenal women. I have Dr. Anne Kamau, engineer Njeri Mburu, and Naomi Mwaura. We are talking about socially just public transport. Ladies, kindly introduce yourselves. Daktari.
Thank you. My name is Anne Kamau from the University of Nairobi. I work at the Institute for Development Studies. I am a sociologist by training and also a medical sociologist. Interested in working in the area of transport, public transportation, children and transportation, and generally also issues of public transport workers, looking from a socially just perspective.
Brilliant. Engineer?
Thank you, Olivia. My name is Engineer Njeri Mburu. I'm a civil engineer by profession and a transport planner. I'm working with an organization called Institute for Transportation and Development Policy, ITDP. And I am the country manager, Kenya. ITDP works with cities and governments to promote sustainable and equitable transport in the urban areas. Thank you.
Naomi?
Morning, everybody. My name is Naomi Mwaura. I'm the Executive Director of Loan Initiative, a non-profit or NGO in Kenya that works on inclusive mobility, looking at how we can improve public transport access for women, children, people with disability, and the elderly. And I am a psychologist by profession.
Brilliant. You studied psychology undergrad and at master's level?
Yes.
I love it. I love it. I also studied psychology and I love female psychologists. They're always so in tune. Now, you're also a young person, which makes me ask the question, I love it when young people get involved in civic and social matters. Tell me about Flown Initiative, because I thought it was an international organization until we had the conversation like 15 minutes ago, and I realized you started it yourself.
Yes, so we started it with a couple of my girlfriends in university, 4 of us, and that's because we just kept complaining about public transport, and then we decided to conduct a couple of interventions. And to be honest, in the beginning, it was quite trial and error. We failed a lot of times. And in June 2013, we finally decided to register it. But as I mentioned, we were in university, we were not employed, we were broke. And so at that time, I was using my pocket money to fund, the trial and errors we were doing at Flown Initiative. So in order to bribe my parents, I named it after my parents. So I combined both of their names, Florence and Nehemiah, and we have Flown Initiative.
And Florence obviously contributed more than Nehemiah. It's just a joke. So tell me, Anne, do we have a public transportation system in this country?
By true definition of what a public transport system is, that should be provided by the government, owned by the government, we would say we do not have. But in practice, yes, we do have a public transport system.
We have transportation used by the public, but it's not public transport. We don't have any form of public transport at all?
Well, if the government, for example, gets into an arrangement where it ensures that the members of the public have access to a government-regulated transport system, then we say it's a public transport system. It can provide the services itself.
Yes.
Or it can get into partnership, but ensure that it controls and regulates the provision of the
is there
service.
currently any public-private partnership with regards to transportation in this country, Engineer?
Not quite. We have the informal public transport system, which is privately owned, but regulated by the government, by the National Transport Safety Authority. That's NTSA.
So they regulate what? How fast they can go, how many they can have at a time, the routes that they serve, the cost. Is cost a factor? No. So they can charge whatever they want.
Yes, they can charge what they want.
And Naomi, you said that was a major problem for you because you were in university, you're using a lot of money, and you said, no, enough is enough. So since 2013, when you launched Flown, what sort of initiatives have you undertaken?
So we've been working, I would say our most popular program is our Women in Transport program, which works to attract, retain and advance women professionals in the industry. We've had quite a handful of women in the industry. So you find that most public transport modes of means of transport are very male dominated, and so we are trying to change that by providing professional development courses, and so you would notice that there is no school or university or college you can go if you want to be a matatu conductor, if you want to be a matatu driver. Where do you go when you want to be a stage manager?
Yes.
And so for us as Flown Initiative, we are trying to fill in that gap by professionalizing the industry.
On 94.4 Spice FM in Nairobi, it is an all 80s 00 direct, the Spice FM birthday weekend. And I see that your requests are already coming in at Spice FM KE. Keep them coming through, but remember, female artists and only tracks from the 80s. Good morning, I'm Olivia Otieno, and I'm joined by three sensational women who are talking about socially just public transport. And ladies, we've already established in Kenya, we do not have a public transportation system because by definition, it's owned and operated by the government. But we're seeking to have public-private partnerships, which you're telling me, Anne, is the best way to go about it usually. And engineer, you've carried out some interesting research where you've been benchmarking what you think we should have in Kenya against what's happening in other countries. Tell me about that.
Yes, I have personally visited Dar es Salaam.
Yes.
Next to Kenya, where they have a BRT, a bus rapid transit system. It's a bus system which works efficiently. It's scheduled. And you don't have to wait for long for the bus to come or for the bus to get filled.
Yes.
And they are large buses, and the system is very well organized, and you have information on what is happening with the system, what time to expect the buses, that kind of thing.
Do they have accessibility for, let's say, persons with disabilities, just to throw a spanner?
Yes, they do, because the level of the bus, of the floor of the bus and the station,
yes,
the level is the same. So even somebody with a wheelchair can be able to navigate between the bus when entering the bus or alighting from the bus. You don't have to use some steps. So it's fully accessible.
And who runs it? Is it the government or is it private?
It's partially between the government. The government is regulating, overseeing the operations, but there is an operator who is operating the buses.
And profiting. So there is a commercial element.
There's a commercial element, excellent, but government is really in this system, in the whole thing. The way it's organized, the government is regulating. It's making sure that the system is giving best quality service to the passengers. It's on time, the number of buses. Dar es Salaam, there are still a few weaknesses here and there, but they are getting there. They have, first of all, they have the infrastructure, which the government provided.
Yes.
It's a gold standard BRT.
So there are lanes. There are lanes for buses, specific bus lanes?
There are specific dedicated lanes for the buses.
I like that.
And those lanes are not used by any other vehicles. So it's giving priority to the majority. It's giving priority to the less privileged. And making sure you are transporting people. You're not transporting cars.
You know, I like what you've said about giving priority, but I don't necessarily feel that it's for the less privileged because I personally don't own a car. And if we had a public transportation system like that, I would use the bus. You know, Naomi, what struck me about the organization that you founded is that you saw a gap and you saw a need, right? Yes. So from that gap and that need, what do you think we need, especially to address the commute needs of young people in Nairobi, but also across the country?
Well, that's $1 million question.
I know, right?
We could be here for 2 hours if I'm to comprehensively address it.
Psycho. No, just kidding.
I think as you look at our population, most of us are youth. Majority are unemployed. We do have a very high unemployment rate.
Yes.
I think we could even, as government, should start as easy as enforcement and looking at standardized fare, because that helps, for example, for you to plan your trip, right? Looking at...
not even your trip, just your life and your budget.
And your budget, right? Also, developing infrastructure that promotes zero emissions mode of transport. And this is walking and cycling. Yes. How can somebody walk and cycle to, from Nairobi, and we do have really good weather that can promote that, but we do not have the infrastructure to support that.
I don't know how the head of radio at Spice FM, one Mr. Brian Obara, cycles to work on almost a daily basis. I saw his outfit. It's a very, very serious professional cycling outfit. But the point of the matter is, he's able to do that, but a majority of people are not able to do that because of where they live and the lack of the infrastructure. And as you can see, more of us would do that if the infrastructure was in place.
Yeah. And also looking at how public transport can be a major source of employment for the youth, right? So by just professionalizing that, we can get more professional youths into the industry. Right now, youths run public transport, right?
Yes.
Talking about matatus, boda-bodas, tuk-tuk, but they do not have the skills. You're learning on the job, right? So then
and they're unregulated to a certain extent.
Yes.
You almost assume, because there was a time when no one wanted their daughter associated with anybody in the public transportation industry. Oh, no, they're vagabonds, they're this, they're that, So if it was more reputable, people would actually find, I finished school, I'm going into this, and there's an opportunity for growth even to management level.
Yeah. And even providing just decent pay, right? With all the benefits that should come with any job, right? Right now, most of the workers are informal, with no social protection, no pension, no contracts. You show up to work one day, the boss said, oh, no, sorry, you're unemployed, and there's nothing you can do about it, right?
Yes.
But at the same time, we need to appreciate that public transport is the only place that a youth can go with no CV, without having to, borrow an outfit, a professional outfit, and still go home with about 500 shillings per day, right?
Yes.
And there are not many places where you can go and do that. Yeah.
From a safety and a health perspective, Anne, what does the system look like with regards to transportation for the public in this country?
I think the safety of public transport is really wanting. And I think the COVID-19 pandemic just demonstrated that very clearly to all of us. We know what it meant to get into public transportation during the COVID-19. People felt unsafe. But away from the COVID-19, we would say, even in terms of safety, in terms of accidents, injuries, is a big concern. And I would like to tie with what Naomi is saying in terms of the young people. If you look at most of the traffic injuries, a lot of the young people are affected. Either they were overspeeding, if, like, for example, they're in their own vehicle, or some of them get caught up. If we had a safe public transport system that was safe, friendly, and secure, we would get more young people even riding public transportation systems that don't need to drive their own vehicles, especially when they go to hang out. We don't need to get them on their private vehicles. Let them get into a public transport system that runs 24 hours. It shouldn't be like at midnight.
You no longer have transport.
And then we have young people getting killed on the road because they had a friend's vehicle and they were riding it. Maybe they didn't even have experience. They die. So we need to think about also how children move.
Exactly.
Children are moving to school. How are they moving to school? If you look at this country, a lot of children either from the privileged families go by school buses.
Yes.
So meaning the poor are cut out.
Exactly.
Children from poor families may not afford public transport, school transport systems.
And sometimes that means they're cut off from school.
They're cut off from school. And if they have to go to school, they are accompanied either by an adult, a parent. Most of the time, we find from research that it's women, it's mothers who accompany these children to school.
Yes.
That means we are losing time for this woman who has to accompany the child to school. So what if we've provided a safe environment for children, a safe public transport for children, where we don't even need to have them accompanied by an adult to go to school?
I like those points. Engineer, you had something to add?
Yes. What we find is that on the issue of safety, most of the people or all the people who are using public transport will walk at some point or the other. And you find that our urban areas lack walking and cycling facilities.
Yes.
And also something else that happens is that there are no crossing facilities. If you imagine moving from one point to another, and maybe you have to make a transfer from, let's say, the bus station to Odeon Cinema, then you have to cross several roads.
Yes.
And there are no crossing facilities.
And adequate lighting.
And adequate lighting. And you find that the vehicles are speeding. So there are two aspects: the speeds of the vehicles and lack of the right facilities for the pedestrians.
Yes.
And that is where many pedestrians are hit by cars, and they lose their lives or they are injured. And that's an area that the government needs to look into. And the engineers who are designing our urban roads, we need to make the urban roads safe for the pedestrians. Thank you.
We are celebrating Spice's second birthday. You can send, birthday greetings at SpiceFM KE on any social media platform you like, plus your song requests and your shout outs. But please, because it's all 80s and I only play tracks by women, come on, please. Let's play accordingly. Right now, though, I'm joined by three sensational women. We're talking about socially just public transportation. Engineer Njeri Mburu, we have Naomi Mwaura and Dr. Anne Kamau from the University of Nairobi. I'm going to call you Anne. Don't worry.
Sure.
Nitawacha you ya daktari. Mamangu anaangalia, Mom. She's the one who said, I was respecting her title. We were talking about benchmarking our transportation system, especially that accessed by the public. And you'd mentioned something very interesting in that you've been to Dar es Salaam. But engineer, where else internationally, out of Africa perhaps, have you gone to analyze their transportation systems?
I have been to Bogota, Colombia.
Yes.
And I experienced their bus transit system.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that it was very efficient. They are able to transport over 40,000 people or passengers per hour per direction, which is very high. So you find that they have the dedicated lanes.
Yes.
If I may talk a bit about a BRT, what they have in Bogota. They have dedicated lanes for the buses. They also have that level boarding, that the level of the bus is the same as the level of the station. That improves the accessibility and the speed of boarding and alighting. There's also the median alignment. The stations are in the middle, like if you have passed through Thika Road, the stations are in the middle of the road.
Okay.
So that there is no conflict between the buses and the rest of the traffic.
Yes.
So it's really giving priority to the public transport.
But if it's in the middle of the road, they have to get to the edges. So isn't that a safety and security sort of a risk?
Yes, you provide crossing facilities.
Yes.
In Dar es Salaam, they have provided what we call tabletop crossings, which are raised, and that way you slow down the vehicles and provide for universal access. And the tabletop crossings actually somehow they once you put the tabletop crossings, because I've seen Kisumu City put tabletop crossings.
Yes.
Drivers start to slow down. They stop for the pedestrians.
Excellent.
So it's something that I think we need to borrow.
Definitely.
Something else about the BRT is off-board fare collection, which also facilitates speedy movement of the buses,
How do they
making
do
them
that?
more efficient. There's a kiosk where you pay for your ticket before you get to the bus.
Okay.
So you don't go paying for your fare inside the bus.
Okay.
And that makes it more efficient and faster. We need to have systems which are efficient, which are faster, which are affordable to
That would
everybody.
also regulate the cost of transportation, because if you are paying for your ticket before you alight, chances are you're not going to be suddenly charged more money when you're inside the bus already.
Yes, there is an agreement between the government and the operator on the issue of the fare. So it's not the operator to decide, I will be charging this in the morning during the peak hour.
Yes.
And then during the day I can charge a different fare. No, that is in the contract. There is a contract between the government and the operator.
Excellent.
And it states what you're going to be charging.
Naomi, you said that you were also at some point in Colombia. What were you doing there?
I had gone there for a study tour. Again, just to see what the rest of the world was doing.
Yes.
And I was privileged to go to Medellin in Colombia. And one of the amazing thing I saw with Medellin is the integration. So, for example, you use one card for all the modes of transport: the bus, the train, the cable car, and even the bike share.
Okay. And this is preloaded prior to you getting onto whichever transportation system?
Yes, it is. And then there's also standardized fare, so you know how much you should have in the car depending on where you're going. In addition, there was, in every station, you can get into any other mode of transport. So like gate A is the train, gate B is the bus, gate C is the cable car, maybe gate D is now walking out probably. And then outside you'll find, for example, a bike.
Okay. Those are city-provided bicycles or county-provided?
Yes. Okay. So there were city-provided bicycle, but for the bicycle, it was also a public-private partnership.
Yes.
But for example, cable cars and the train, that was all government-run. In addition, something I found very interesting was in the stations, they had different statues of different Marys.
Okay.
Right? The religious, like the Mary Mother of Jesus.
Yes, of course.
And that helped for you to, for example, if you cannot read and write, you can say, okay, I need to go to, for example, the First Mary.
So Our Lady Queen of Lourdes.
Yes.
Takes me to.
And then I'll drop off at the other, for example, Mary something else.
Okay.
And I thought
clearly not a Catholic.
No, I'm definitely a Protestant.
You're really struggling with your iconology. Okay.
And so I thought that is something we could even come back to Kenya and implement. So, for example, KenCom can be, maybe there's a statue of a lion. So you say, okay, drop off at the statue of the lion.
Why not our heroes? Yeah? Why not our Kenyan heroes? That way we'll also know them.
Well, I agree with you. The only problem would be like maybe
people might not know who they are. They might have to read.
But with a lion, you'll know. With a giraffe, you'll know.
Good point.
So I thought they had really thought about their population, right, and really customized the transport system to cater to the specific, unique context and needs of their community.
I love it. Let me ask you, Anne, when it comes to the public transport working group that you've been involved in, I understand that you came up with 5 specific pillars for public transportation, socially just public transportation. Yes. And before we get into those 5 pillars, what is your understanding? What is your definition of socially just public transport?
Socially just public transport, if we just pick from the word justice itself, it's about human rights. And when it comes to justice, we talk about distributive justice, we talk about procedural justice. So we need to think about, for example, when we look at our public transport in Kenya, in terms of distribution, urban areas distribution, is it equitable? When you look at rural-urban distribution, is it equitable? If you think about the different modes, whether some areas are mostly by motorbikes, other areas are most served by matatus, bicycles, even bicycle bodabodas we have now, for example, in Kisumu. So can we say that we have fairly equal access to public transportation that is safe, affordable,
accessible
for all, for vulnerable populations, women, children, the elderly persons, women with luggage, or all of that? Can we say that this is the kind of public transport system we have? So we need to think about what are the human rights issues of justice, fairness, and equity.
Now, engineer, a very interesting point has been raised there. And what is the government doing to try and address some of these points? Are you at ITDP working with the government to try and address some of these issues?
Yes, we are partnering with government and especially NAMATA, Nairobi Metropolitan Area Transport Authority.
Yes.
To develop the BRT system.
Yes.
There's the Thika Road BRT, that is line 1. There's line 2. There's line 1, which follows Mombasa Road under the expressway. And there are actually 5 BRT corridors that are planned in Nairobi. So we support government. We give technical support on the designs of the BRT corridors to make them the best, to introduce the best practice BRTs in
But
Kenya.
These are all in a planning stage. When do we hope to see things rolling or underway or executed?
I am happy to note that, first of all, Thika Road is ongoing.
Yes.
It's under construction at the moment. And also the other day we were taken through the designs for the BRT line 1, that is Mombasa Road, Wayaki Way.
Yes.
And it's progressing very well. I was very happy to see that government is really taking these things very seriously. And the design is quite good, but there needs to be some improvement. So we look at the designs, we review the designs, and we point out areas where the designs can be improved so that we can achieve what the gold standard BRT, the best BRT in the world.
To challenge that of Dar es Salaam.
Yes.
And I'm still with amazing women talking about socially just public transport. And I was just telling Naomi, the government has failed. The government has failed on all these 5 pillars you were telling me about: accessibility, affordability, infrastructure. But you say maybe I'm wrong? Maybe I'm misguided?
Not really. I would say...
You agree with me that they failed?
I would say there's room for improvement.
Okay, such as?
Right.
Everything.
So I think they attempted
When?
With the NYS buses for a while. Unfortunately, they had to ground their operations.
Because?
Reasons are still unclear for now. We've not heard about the specific reasons why. But
if I don't finish a course, if my mother puts me in a university or an institution to do a course, yeah, and then I don't finish, and then I tell her, oh, the reasons are unclear, she's going to knock me one on the head. So how are you telling me, yeah, that my tax shillings, right, were lost somewhere because of unclear reasons? Because, of course, if it's public transportation operated and owned by the government, it's my money that's doing it, or borrowed cash.
Yes.
So let's be honest, it's a failure. But, right, I understand that through this working group, and Anne, you'll be able to tell me, steps are being made. We've established 5 pillars, right? Before Naomi tells me those 5 pillars in detail, can you just highlight some of the points of those 5 pillars that are really dear to your heart?
Yeah, I think one of the most dear pillar in my heart is the pillar on availability.
Yes.
And I always say that we now have embraced motorcycles as part of our public transport system.
Yes.
But always asked, when I put the motorcycles on a pedestal of where I'm looking at safety,
Yes.
how safe can we say they are? But however, when I put that on that measurement, then I ask myself, why are people using them?
Exactly.
Is it because they don't have an alternative? And that is perhaps the only option that is available. Remember, people have to move.
Yes.
And they can only move with the only means that is most
Provided
for them,
Yes.
that is available, and that's affordable.
Exactly. So availability and affordability. What about you, engineer? What are some of the aspects of these 5 pillars that you feel we really need to understand?
Inclusive planning, inclusive decision making, designs. What we have found out is that, or what has been the practice is that when roads are designed, mostly they do not include facilities for public transport. They also don't include adequate facilities for non-motorized transport. But I want to say that this is changing. So I don't want to say that government is not trying. Government is
Trying.
Trying.
I love that. I love her diplomacy. Don't you
Yes.
just love her diplomacy? What I also recognize with regards to inclusivity is that primarily, for example, and this isn't even about Kenya, this is about the UK. I realized as a young single woman, then as a married mother, London is a very different city. Yeah. And when you're planning and having these working groups, can you also keep that in mind? Because the majority of the time, I didn't even think about accessibility for those with disabilities or those who had to have children with them or all the other luggage that women have to tout around. Or even if you decided to cycle part of the distance and then want to get into public transport at some other stage, maybe because you have a long journey. And like you talked about accessibility, maybe from where you are, the closest transportation is, let's say, 3 kilometers away. So you want to cycle to that destination, but then what do you do with your bicycle once you arrive? You know what I mean? So I think we need to think about it from a 360 degree, woman with child, maybe 2 children. So you have to have this child on your back and you're having another one. So they have to see where they're going and be able to cross the road. Somebody with the buggy, somebody with a bicycle. But for you as a young person, give me now an overview of those 5 pillars.
I think for me, I would say money is always an issue. So I would stick to pillar number 2, affordability. And I would also say inclusivity, because as a young person, I'm definitely growing and definitely hoping to start a family, but also looking at how fragile youth can be.
Yes.
You know, they say you're just one incident away from a disability.
True.
And I do know, and I'm very aware as a young person, that this will not last for long.
Yes.
And that the public transport industry is not ready for the future me, who might be old or might have a disability or might be walking around with 2-3 kids, that at that time I would have to explore other means of moving around. And then also I'd like to highlight the issue of sometimes as a young person, taking public transport can be a matter of life and death. And we've seen of where commuters have been pushed out of moving vehicles. For example, there's one lady, Dorcas, who died after being pushed out of a matatu on Thika Road.
Yes.
And no justice has been served up to date.
Yes.
And these are the realities and these are our lived experiences as youth, that you get kicked out of a moving matatu for a 20 bob, right?
You lose your life over 20 shillings.
20 bob.
Yes.
Right. And it goes back to the issue of enforcement, of regulation, that the government needs to do a better job with.
Thank you. It's just so frustrating to think about all the impunity that is ongoing in this country, and that even public transportation, as Naomi has said, can be a matter of life and death. Mm-hmm. Good afternoon. I am Olivia Otieno. This is 00 Direct, female host, female artist, female guest. And someone has asked me at SpiceFM KE, why are the men not represented? Si muko na platform zenyu? Hama hamna? Huh? Tafuta! No, but seriously. The point of the matter is, this is an all-female show, but you can call, you can text, and as you've done, you can comment online at SpiceFM. If there's a burning issue, something is really bothering you, there's a track you really want to hear, a shout-out you really want to send, or a comment you really want to make, at SpiceFM, gender neutrality, gender inclusivity, online on 00 Direct. I'm being joined by 3 sensational women. We're talking about socially just public transportation. I am of the opinion, Sirikali may fail, number 1. Number 2, there's no social justice in our public transportation system. Number 3, I don't own a motor vehicle, so I'm not understanding why, even when roads and infrastructure and everything is being considered, it's being considered from the point of view of somebody who's driving a Pajero, somebody who's driving a Range Rover, somebody who's driving a government bought, my taxpayer paid for Mercedes. Engineer, what is this I'm hearing about a corridor, right? Mombasa Malindi, that is not even being considered for public transportation. It's being considered only for private cars. How does that make any sense at all whatsoever? Because you'll get to wherever you're going, but all the people who you depend on with regards to support, whether it's staff, etc., will not be able to get there. So how is that something that's encouraging development in this country?
Yes, it's a bit concerning that...
No, it's a shame and it's a failure. There, I said it.
Yes, it is indeed. You'll find that in the urban areas in Kenya, over 80% of our people are either walking or using public transport. Okay. And over 50% are actually using public transport. We partnered with Mombasa County and carried out demand assessment for public transport. Yes. And established that that corridor from Mombasa Malindi Road, they need public transport. Yes. They need efficient public transport. Yes. Because Mombasa is starting to grow. It's growing very fast. Of course. And of course, there's starting to be a lot of congestion. Yes. We need to have efficient public transport, and we should not have our public transport caught up in traffic, because it doesn't work.
And most of the traffic isn't even from the public transportation. Most of the traffic is from personal cars, isn't it?
Yeah, most of the traffic is from the personal cars.
You know, I don't own a vehicle, so I use quote unquote public transportation with regards to, taxis. But I always see that every other, let's say 10, 15 vehicles, even 30 vehicles, and you have one public transportation system. vehicle, whether it's a taxi, whether it is a matatu, whether it's a bus, right? So in order to talk about congestion and all the problems that come in as a result of that, how can we address this issue?
I think, Olivia, the first thing that you need to understand is that when you use a taxi, it's still almost like a private means of
transportation. And that's why I'm advocating for a public transportation system, one that is socially just, which I can use. A few years ago, there was the metro. Do you remember the metro? The metro? It used to pick people from outside Kencom. You had to queue. It was very organized. If it had stopped, people who were inside alighted first, and then those. You all have vehicles. You all look at me like, what am I talking about? You've never used public transport in your life. Nini fake kabisa. No, but the point of the matter is, right, when the metro started in Nairobi, I used it. I saw Red Sun also use it. And he's currently in the US, not the point. But I saw a lot of people who you'd think would want to show off in their vehicles use public transportation. So, Anne, yes, the taxi is still private, only because I don't feel safe in the current system that we have with regards to public transportation. Continue.
Yes, I think before the metro, we had the Kenya bus services.
Yes.
And the Kenya bus was quite efficient, I would say. And a lot of people used Kenya bus services. And why we have matatus right now is because the Kenya bus could not accommodate the needs of the users, the commuters.
Which was what? What was that need?
I don't have the numbers, but you could find people now hanging on doors outside. They were just hanging on anywhere they could hold.
So capacity.
So the demand was too high, and the Kenya buses could not meet that demand.
Yes.
And that's how we have now the matatus coming up. Of course, it was through a presidential decree starting from 1973, and then in early, I think, late 70s, early 90s is when we had now the matatus coming in to try and meet this demand.
Late 70s or late 80s?
In between there.
Okay.
But they came in as illegal. They were unregulated. For a long time, they've been considered as illegal.
Yes.
And this failure, even for the government to, at the time, even regulate them and formalize them, contributed to a large extent to the challenges that we're having today, even now. And when we think about even the bus rapid transit systems, we are still thinking about kicking matatus out of the road. And I don't think this is the way to go. When you think about Bogota, for example, in Colombia, we have what we'd call the blue buses.
Yes.
The BLT have the red buses. But we have the blue buses, which are from the feeder routes. Like what would say the routes, the different routes that we have in the country.
Yes.
So we need to think, how will we even connect these bus rapid transit systems
to those
with the current existing matatus without necessarily saying that we want to get matatus out of our roads, because they're providing a very important service. How can we formalize that service itself? How can we organize so that then it doesn't become punitive for the passengers? Because right now it is the users who many times suffer. For example, when fares are short because it has rained.
Engineer, what do you have to say to that? Because these dedicated lanes, for example, will they be accessible to matatus?
The dedicated lanes will not be accessible to matatus, but those are some of the corridors. Like now in Nairobi, there are just 5 corridors for the BRT.
Yes.
The rest of the city will be served by the matatus. And we need even to streamline the matatu system. We need reforms in the matatu sector so that government comes in and it's making sure that the transportation by matatus is safe, it's efficient, it's user-friendly, so that anybody can use public transport. And we need to attract even the people who are using cars, because the cars are very inefficient in using the road space. And that is why our road space is congested. It's because of the private cars.
Naomi, how much does it cost to get from town to here on Mombasa Road by matatu?
Okay, so I would say, I come from Kiambu. I live in Kiambu.
Okay.
So Kiambu, depending on the times, I would say about 80 to 100 bob to Nairobi. And then from Nairobi now to here, and I mean Nairobi like CBD,
yes,
would be about 60 bob, 70 bob.
That is a lot of money.
Yeah, that's a lot of money. And that's just one way, right? And even then, you don't have a specific figure of how much it's going to cost. You have to, act with,
hope
with
and dreams.
Yeah, with a range.
Yes.
Right. But I also wanted to just touch a little bit on the issue of congestion.
Yes.
And one of the the fifth pillar of the socially just public transport looks at sustainability.
Yeah.
Right. And the issue that transport contributes about 15%, I think in Kenya it's 15% of greenhouse gas emissions, right? And it's so, given the way our population is growing, it's unsustainable for everybody to own and to aspire to own a private means of transport.
Yes.
But then at the same time, you can't tell people, okay, don't own a public transport
I know people
vehicle.
with 4 cars.
Yeah.
You know, it's one family. They have 4 cars. I don't know what they're doing with all their 4 cars, but they got them. You know?
But with that, there's that aspect of what we call car pride.
Oh, yes,
Right.
yes. That's a huge thing in Africa,
Yeah.
especially in Kenya. People love to show off their motor vehicles. They love to tell you about them. They love you to see them in them. It's a huge thing, which honestly, I'm just like, I don't understand that. Because I'm just happy walking or riding a bike, to be honest. But anyway, that's besides the point. Yes, so car pride is a thing.
Yes, so as I was saying that it's sustainable, but we cannot ask people to not aspire to own private means of transport when they are captive users of public transport. And that's because it doesn't cater to their individual needs. And so as stakeholders, as government, we need to come together to provide a better alternative to personal means of transport. Like provide, for example, I've been to Amsterdam. Right?
Yes.
And one of the things at the end of that trip, it was very short, it was about maybe 3-4 days, was that at no point did I think of hailing an Uber or did I think of getting into a personal means of transport, because it was an amazing public transport industry. And I came back home and I'm like, this is possible.
It is.
And as a citizen, if I was a teacher, I would give our government maybe a C.
She's so generous. You know, you're so
But I would
generous.
say
Obviously, you know
we
somebody
see the
in government.
potential. No,
Yeah.
you know, as a teacher, you don't want to be too rough on your students. So you say, okay, you're a C, but I can see potential for you to be an A. And as you can see, your brother next door in Amsterdam or Dar es Salaam is doing way better. And so it's to encourage them to be like, okay, we see what you're doing, but you can do more. And
Before
here
we
to
talk
support
about
you.
our next steps with regards to now that we have those 5 pillars, you know, including sustainability, Engineer, I want to ask you a question about when you think about the transportation system, the cost that you're attributing to this new rapid bus route, right?
Yeah.
How, will it be affordable for the average Kenyan, or will it be something that is running on empty?
Yes, it will be affordable.
Do you have
Because,
any estimated costs?
A BRT will cost about 1 billion per kilometer, but roads in Kenya have costed
Wait.
more.
You're talking about the cost of construction.
The cost
I'm
of
talking about the
total
cost
construction.
of a Kenyan citizen riding on that bus once it's established
Oh,
on
okay.
that lane. Because if it's something that costs us so much, we want to recoup whatever debts we incurred as a result of wanting to have it, and then the average Kenyan that we're hoping to serve can't even afford it, then what is the point? Do we have estimated costs?
One very good, very important aspect of the BRT system is that you can be able to have an affordable system.
Okay.
In Dar es Salaam, we paid about 20 shillings equivalent
Okay. Kenya shillings.
to use the BRT.
Okay.
So I'm not saying that that is what the BRT will cost, the fare
Yes.
for the BRT will be in Kenya, but the system will be such that it is affordable to the common person.
In Nakuru streaming, spicefm.co.ke. Good afternoon. How are you doing this 80s 00 Direct Spice FM second birthday weekend? I'm Olivia Otieno, taking your requests and dropping them from 1 p.m. Don't worry, Janet Mirigo, I have found it. I have that perfect track for you, and I will be dropping it. At SpiceFM KE is how you can reach me. Right now, though, I would like to wrap up with 3 incredible women. The topic is socially just public transport. Naomi, I'm going to start with you.
Yes.
Parting shots. What do we need to do? I know we have a C as a government, right? Tunaweza pata B aje. A, I know is too aspirational. Let's just look for a B, maybe even a B minus.
Yes, I think for me, I would like to emphasize
Yes.
pillar number 3 that looks at inclusive in terms of not leaving anyone behind and making arrangements to cater to already marginalized groups. And these are people living with disability, children, women, and the elderly. And for me, for them to get to a B is to involve these stakeholders in all their planning design and also being very intentional about meeting their travel demands and needs. And I think just to wrap up is that for me, public transport is not a lost cause. Just like any other system, it has a few flaws here and there, and those are the flaws we need to focus on. And I believe, and as our work shows, that public transport can be the preferred mode of transport, that if Kenyans have the money and the means to buy a car, that they choose not to, because public transport is that good.
We also need a paradigm shift in our thinking with regards to gas guzzling atrocities we call the four-wheel drive.
Yeah.
Right?
Totally agree with that.
It is not a symbol of your success. It's actually a symbol of a lot of failures, but we leave that for another day. Let's go to Anne. I'm going to call you Dr. Anne. Why not? I like it. Parting shots?
Thank you. I think for me, we need to think about public transport as a whole issue of human rights and equity. That when you think about human rights, then what is the role of government in terms of ensuring that every person feels respected and dignified? Are they traveling in public transport simply because, like what Naomi said, they feel they're captive, or because it's out of choice? And when they're in this public transport system, do they feel protected? Do they feel dignified? Do they feel respected? And are there examples that we can say are working and make him feel passengers feel respected?
And we've already established that they're not, right? So what are the steps that actually have to be put in place for there to be, for these 5 pillars to be actualized, for me to feel that, yes, I want to get into a public transportation here in Kenya? So
we need first to change the mindset of the Kenyans. A lot of us still think that once I'm behind the wheel, I'm the driver. It's a mark of success. But I think this is the way we're socialized. But I think we need to socialize ourselves differently. But we need the people who socialized us. The ones who are...
Shouldn't we say that after the next election, the people in government must use public transport?
That should actually be...
I think we have to stop buying government cars. Yeah? Stop buying government cars. Let's just have them use public transportation, because that money can be used in healthcare. That money can be used in education. I know engineers are going to be like, hey, where? But the point of the matter is, right, if we forced the people in government, right, who are actually public servants, to use public transport, it would change.
Yes, I don't think we need to use force. We need to use persuasion, because force
ultimately
people will essentially, when you use force, they'll abandon it at some point.
True.
Because you cannot use force forever. We need to get into a way that people appreciate the need to use public transport, but more importantly, to invest in them.
Excellent.
And make them friendly. And here also I would like to talk about the workers. From our research, what we find that people are really liking when women are also providing the services.
Yes.
But when you look across Kenya, public transport is mainly provided by men. So again, how do we increase the number of women in public transport and make them feel that they're welcome to also provide this service?
Safety, I think, is a key player in that, because safety is one of the reasons why I sometimes don't use public transportation. And to be involved in the industry, if you're unwelcome, you're also unsafe. So even if you're welcome and yet there's a security risk behind you operating a vehicle or being inside a vehicle primarily with men, you may wonder, for your safety. So that's also something that we need to address at some point. And you had a question for the engineer?
Yes, I would want, just maybe on behalf of perhaps other Kenyans, ask. A main concern, for example, on the bus rapid transit route, the corridor right now on the Thika Road, is when you look at how the stations are built, they're wide apart. And you're not sure even how they'll be interconnected to the estates where people live, the residential areas. So even if I wanted to use the BRT bus, the bus rapid transit system itself, how do I connect to the terminal?
Okay.
For where most of us live, you really can't cycle. And cycling in Kenya is very unsafe.
Mm-hmm.
Matatus are not exactly... Matatus going to be connected to the BRT system itself? Or will we have to drive our small or big vehicles to the station and then leave them there and then take on the buses? How do we ensure that there's seamless flow? And more importantly, how do we even ensure that women who are coming from the market with their luggage, with their children, don't feel that it's an unnecessary burden for me to actually get on the BRT bus?
And that it's an elitist form of transportation.
Yes.
Engineer and Jerry, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Anne, for that question. The BRT is a system. It's part of the whole system. It needs to be integrated with other modes of transport. For example, it needs to be integrated with the walking, the cycling facilities. There needs to be even parking facilities for bicycles, such that if somebody rides to the station, they can be able to park their bike and get into the bus. But also, apart from that, one very advantage of the BRT is compared to, let's say, rail, is that the buses can get out of the corridor and actually move maybe a few kilometers further to reach where most of the people are coming from.
Excellent.
So it's possible to extend the services beyond
Wonderful.
the corridor.
Finally, your parting thoughts, Engineer Njeriburu?
Yeah, mine is to the decision makers and to the engineers who design our roads in the urban areas. It's to remind or to let us remember that over 80% of our urban population are either walking or using public transport. So when we are allocating resources, when we are designing urban roads, let us keep that in mind. Let us provide public transport facilities. Let us provide walking and cycling facilities, because those are the modes for our urban population. And our urban populations are growing very fast. So we need efficient, safe, affordable, and available public transport system.
Yes, we all know
Thank
we
you.
need that. My question is, if it doesn't happen, who's accountable? And what can we do about it? I just want to ask all three of you that question, because we all know what we need, because we all want something that's better than what we currently have. But if it doesn't happen, then what? Naomi, you have an organization. Are you going to lobby? Are you lobbying? Are you getting people to support you? What then happens in another 5 years when none of this comes to fruition?
Yes, so part of our mandate is movement building, where we try to work with three stakeholders. Those are researchers, professionals, and also government agencies who we call policymakers, and try to get them to, jointly and in their own position, look at how to promote inclusive mobility. I would say that with the road transport, it's a bit tricky because it's a bit fragmented. We have Kenha, Kurha, Namata, NMS, Rura.
But we all have MCAs. We all have people who represent our public interest in the areas in which we live.
Yeah.
So why don't we go to those people? Why don't we tell them, I'm not able to get from point A to B affordably, efficiently, sustainably, whatever it is. Why are we looking at these large bodies that are really unapproachable, to the average Kenyan, even myself? I'd never heard of them, right? Tell me, engineer.
Yeah, we are looking at these big bodies because they hold the resources. They are the ones who are implementing the facilities.
But the
on
resources
ground.
come from our taxpayers, which our MCAs and our, representatives are the holders of. You know what I mean? So if enough of us said, no, this doesn't work, those bodies wouldn't exist because they're not catering to our interests. So as much as they hold the resources, that is something that is not forever and ever amen. That is something until and when they complete their allocated tasks. But if we don't see anything happening, why don't we lobby the people who are supposed to be representing us to tell these people, my people are suffering here? You're not living up to what you were designed to do. I know you're looking at me and saying, this is something that you've highlighted, haven't you?
Yes, it's true. But again, one of the things we need to ask ourselves, how much is the public involved even on issues of road planning, design? Public participation is almost not there. So they don't even understand.
That is one of the reasons why I
learn.
wanted to have this conversation, because
Yes.
I wanted them to understand is that the power is in your hands. Right? You're the one who has to get from point A to point B. You're the one who has to facilitate your work or facilitate the education of your children or facilitate the whatever income generating activity you're undertaking, needing to go from one place to another, even to see just your family members. So the power is in your hands. Ladies, thank you so much. And I've taken up more time than I should have on this matter, just because it is something that is personally very dear to my heart. And have yourselves a fantastic and wonderful weekend.
Same,
Thank you.